Welcome back, sports fans. I actually can't believe it, but we are doing our race preview series already. I mean, I felt like it was yesterday. I had these two awesome guys with me. So, we're going to take you on an awesome journey. Myself and a selected bunch of co hosts are going to break down each and every World Cup DH race this season of the 2025 season. But this is the preview show, and Crank Brothers have stepped up again. They are synonymous with the downhill racing circuit. Last year, celebrating 14 years in a row of the Elite World Champs win on the Mallet DH pedal. They've also won it quite a few times with Sam Hill on the flat pedal. Sven reminded me of that. They also won the overall title last year on the pedals, so they are killing it. But it's not just the pedals. We know that they've added to their roster with riders that are in the shoes. I love the shoes. I know Sven rides them. I choose the Boa version, but riders like Ronan Dunn, they've added Andy Kolb. He's going to be spoken about in this upcoming episode. Bernard Kerr, he's got an awesome signature one. I'm not sure it's my favorite, but if you like basketball and you like purple, maybe you do. Ocean, Lucashaw, Camille Belange, who hopefully is healthy, Troy Brosnan, who won the last round of the series, and Benoit Coulange, who's going to feature. In other exciting news, Komensal Makov will be running the Crank Brothers wheels this season officially. And Sven will probably give me a bit of shit and say they might have run them not officially before. So that's pretty cool. But that's a mouthful, but if it's not for them, I don't think I'd get these two guys together. And Sven Martin is back, and Alan Milway, both Crank Brothers ambassadors. And just, I know how much passion you guys have for the sport. So I'll start with Alan. We said off air, has there ever been this much to digest before a preseason show?
There's a lot going on, isn't there? There's been an awful lot going on, and honestly, the day after Mont Saint Anne, I was in meetings with the team trying to work out 2025, what's going to happen, what do we need to do, where do we need to be, and obviously working with the other athletes on other teams as well. It's trying to get everyone in a position to race, and there's been a lot of moving parts, so a lot to go through this show, I think.
So if I stay on that, what's the biggest challenge? Maybe Alan, give me that like as a team, and then Sven will maybe give me his biggest like exciting or thing that popped up of these rule changes and stuff.
I think from a team perspective, it was definitely trying to figure out the rider lineup. If I'm honest with you, because we wanted to be a World Series team, and there were certain parameters that we needed for that, and there was a lot of trying to understand, well, which way do we sort of want to go, and how are we going to build this team. And although you can look at the black and white and the race results, me and Greg have got a very similar opinion that we want to have a really good culture within the team and not just sort of buy in the rider, and that really made us think about who would fit well. So there was a lot of conversations going on, and for a lot of riders who were out of contract, it was probably a really good time of year, a really good year for them, because teams were like, well, we need your points, we want you on board, and they could probably go back and forth with a few teams. But from our perspective, it was, we've got quite a big lineup. I think 6 riders is quite a big team, and that's certainly going to be a challenge. But we're excited to have the riders on board that we do. So I think that's for us has been the main thing to start with.
And Svenos, that seemed like a forced bit of excitement for us pundits. You know, we always sharing the gossips and who's going where. And I couldn't believe the rider shakeups, who I guess there was this like perfect storm. The rule changes forcing everyone to potentially grow their teams, or some teams folding, so more riders available. More riders are having these breakout seasons. And then there was the points debacle of the rule changes where you had to get your shit in a pile quickly and hopefully correctly to secure a spot.
Yeah, I mean, there's what you just said in one sentence is you could write a book about. The long and the short of it is there were probably too many riders on track when you're having like 300 riders doing 6, 7, 8 runs, and in a weekend, like 10, 15 runs. That's just too many laps on the track. But it's how they implemented the change to reduce the field is maybe that's what's kind of up for discussion. People for it and against it. So it's not. It, some change needed to happen, and it has happened. It's just sort of how it's happened. It's pushed and forced a few teams out of the playing things. Some riders have to potentially not be able to do World Cups, or applying for teams. I mean, there's so many like side stories, like look at like Goodman Santa Cruz. They're having to apply for wild cards. Yet at a couple of the races that they had in Europe, they were first and second place rider, beating all these world UCI world teams. Yet they have to rely on a wild card, which means they can't secure proper sponsorship because they can't guarantee all the entries. So there's a lot of riders that are definitely of the caliber that should be guaranteed entries. But that aside, what I guess, starting off where we should start off, like usually we have these long, boring off seasons and we're complaining like, oh, we only race for 4 or 5 months. This year's going to be quite different already. We've probably had, if you took the 2 or 3 Aussie races, and then the 3 or 4 New Zealand races, including the Crankworks, and then there's the Hardlines, and then all the national series, which there were a ton of international riders, and now all the Portuguese races, the French, the test event, and like there's the national races, the test events, the IXS 1 and 2, and now in Fort William. We've had like a ton of racing, which has actually been good. Some of it being in different regions. Everyone's able to do some high-level racing with some high-level competition, more importantly. And the teams have had, different opportunities to test out the new structures, some of them the new equipment, some of them completely new sponsors, new trucks. So there's like a ton there's so much you could look at, and you can see kind of a few indicators on who's real quick and who's back up to speed, and who's, there's quite a few like obvious ones that we've seen, and there's quite a lot of movement in the juniors and the speed, and how the juniors are even coming closer to the elite times and winning faster times at some of the races. So yeah, the off-season races, definitely a couple of bigger races worth talking about. And then as for the future season, we've always complained about 6 and 7 rounds, and I think 10 is at a good number. And I think it would be hard to push for any more. If everyone's looked, and Alan will probably know this, especially, most of the racing is happening in Europe, and with most of the races pretty much on a 90-day out of 180 days visa, you literally, and with the blocks of racing not being as easy to plan things as last year, you have a lot of races basically can't go home in big breaks, or they for 2 or 3 weeks, because there's only a week break, so they are having to stay. So that adds to their days in Europe, pushing a lot of people close to 90 days, at 90 days, or over 90 days, which at that point you basically, it's a gray area. You kind of here illegally, which means you have to apply for different kind of visas, and it's not that easy to get, say, a long-term sports visa, because there's a lot of bureaucracy for different countries where you apply from it. And I'm in that same situation myself as working media. I've got to watch my days in and out of Europe. So I think 10's an awesome number that we've all been hoping and wanting and waiting for. And I've always said if we get up to 10, it would be good to have one throwaway event, but that's not happening right now. But that would be an additional help with the amount of injuries these guys are exposed to year round. But then also having 10 races does allow you to have a bad result, because in the last 2 years in the overall, there's been people in the top 5 in the overall that have basically either not done a race or got a flat or didn't get a result. And that was even with 6 or 7 races. So maybe even 10 races you don't need to throw away, because it'll average out at the end of the season.
But let's unpack the 10 races, because I think sometimes we are good at, say, playing devil's advocate and saying there's going to be a knock-on effect and maybe criticizing and stuff. And there are things to criticize. Like you said, there's all these points, but I'm hearing we could have 100, 150 riders on track. So we're still going to get a big field. So that's pretty cool. I've also heard potentially that they offered some of these wildcard teams like a slot for the whole year, but obviously that's not public. So
if they
that
paid
would be
a lot,
cool.
if they paid a lot of money, and actually more than they would have paid for just to be an elite team.
Okay,
So
cool. So
that's
So I think at least the byproduct is we're definitely going to lose some riders, but maybe it was time in their career that if like your hand gets a bit forced, they go, cool, I'm going to race more in America. I'm going to race more hardline. So there's some guys that maybe the tail end of their World Cup career, and this probably pushed them out quicker than maybe we would hope. Like we love having like George Brannigan out there or someone like that, you know, but he was also chatting to him pretty burnt out. And I think but the 10 race series is an awesome thing. Like we've been asking for it. It comes at an ironic time, right? Everything in life, be careful what you wish for, you know, because the industry's struggling a little bit, money's
Yeah.
tighter, teams are having to expand. So someone like Fox Suspension, you know, they might have to spend more just on product to get riders through a 10 race series. It's just, you know, like a small little component. But I wanted to ask Alan, like, I agree there should be a throwaway. I would love one throwaway, especially on a 10 race series. Is this going to afford people maybe a way to have like a bad race? Like, is consistency going to play even more of a role? Or now you can risk it a bit more and know that out of 10 races, surely most riders are going to have an issue, a flat, a crash, or something like that. Like, how do you think the strategy is going to play out?
I think strategy will come into it, and I would aim at you pick your days where you think, am I on today? Is it looking good? And if it is, then you put everything into it. And if it's a day when you don't think you're on, we've seen Bruni is so good at that. Is when he doesn't think he's got it, he'll still get down in a sixth or something. He'll still be there or thereabouts, and I think that makes the difference. I think this championship will probably be won on your bad days and not necessarily your good days. And whether that's an injury or a mechanical, staying the course, the schedule is pretty packed out. Going to Poland week off, and then we've got a back-to-back race that's tight because we've got a Sunday race going into a Saturday race. And then we've got 1 week off of Val di Sole. So you've got a lot of racing going on, and that's just until June. So coming into the season fresh and coming in fit is important. And obviously there's some riders that have had injuries and are sort of coming back. So whether they're going to be ready, like for us, Eris won't be in Poland. We don't think she's going to be there, but because of the long schedule, we've actually had a very similar discussion to this, to say, look, it's a long season. I think that one result may not matter as much as it might have done in other years. So we're trying to play that long game.
Sven, and when you see the 10 race series and that, I tend to agree. I think Burrell, even on the podcast, said like if he has made mistakes where he just wanted to do well at every race and he maybe should have stepped back a bit. And I feel like, when there's only a few races a season, like you got to just go for it, even when you're not having a good day, because you can't really make up for it. You can't go, okay, this one's going to be shit, but the next two are really going to suit me. So I like what Alan said there. Maybe you do, someone like Loic could be really smart and maybe build into a season, especially coming off an injury. What do you say to the 10 race series and maybe the two new venues? It's two new ones, Val di Fassa and Whiteface, that's getting added. That's like a cool topic in the 10 race.
Le Tuile.
Oh, is it Le Tuile?
No, Val di Fassa is the EDR venue, but Le Tuile.
Oh, sorry. I read the wrong line. You're right. Sorry. Le Tuile, not Val di Fassa, yeah.
In conjunction with the 10 races, you remember the biggest thing for these top 10 elite guys that have been in that position for so long, there is no more protection. And yes, there's the last chance qualifier, but if you
I like how you're calling it last chance to butt in on purpose and not Q1, Q2. That's interesting.
If you have that mechanical or flat or little washout, it's so tight, you have a little mistake, you're not in the top 20. So say you make a little mistake, before you might have qualified top 30, but now you're not in that automatic top 20. And then you have your flash or your mechanical, your flat tire. So there's a good chance with the amount of top riders, we got like 20, it's not just 5 guys battling for a podium. We've got 20 guys battling for a podium. There's a good chance that we won't see 1 or 2 of them, not necessarily every round, but some rounds they will, suffer from not having the protection. But, the protection, I'm happy for the no more protection, but then that brings, then is there a throwaway event? But then if there's not throwaway events, people might, if say they have an event in Brazil one year, or Japan or New Zealand, then some teams like be like, okay, well, we'll just not go there, and that'll be our throwaway event, and to save money. So there's pros and cons of everything. But one thing that does worry me from the riders have benefited quite well, especially the top riders, and getting their worth, and people like Marine really getting their worth in terms of getting good, I'd say increases in pay to bring the points to the teams. After this season, I feel there's going to be a unfairly weighted power to the teams and not the riders, because these teams, especially the ones that finished in the top 10, they're going to automatically have a 3-year license. So it doesn't matter who they field in the next 3 years or where they finish in the next 3 years, maybe only the final third year. So that's 4 years down the line from now. Would they need to have good results again when they, so the worry is, like, some of the teams might have these hugely stacked rosters now because they've got to get that top 10 team, but then they might just like knock off a few riders because at that point they've got a license for 3 years. So hopefully that doesn't happen. And I'm thinking about problems that, that we don't even need to think about now. We're ahead of that. But I do feel like the teams will have a bit too much power, and because of those top teams, there's going to be very little rotation of new teams being able to crack in and get, to take up the other spots. Maybe that 11th through 15th team will be the revolving teams, and those will be the people like Goodman, Santa Cruz. If they continue on the way they are, then they can fall into, elite team status or pro team status the following year. So that's my only kind of worry, I guess. Great to start off in Poland again, and it was a great for a first year. There was very few things that needed fixing. Maybe tweak one part of the course, which was like kind of awkward corners and stuff. But other than that, it's going to be a great first venue, passionate fans. Yeah. The only other thing, which is not so much related to downhill, but it impacts a little bit of the sports viewing for the media and the public and the fans. We used to have EDR racing on day one of practice for downhill, and now you've got the EDR pros racing on the same day as qualifying and quali 2, which is like you're having kind of the most elite version of enduro racing on another day, competing with downhill racing for eyeballs and view and media and photographers and filmers. That's a kind of a sad state of affairs in that. But then there are a couple of standalone enduros, not many, but there are a couple that will obviously have their own day in the sun.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the LCQ, they're calling it Q1, Q2. I think if you're going to force the 30 riders, we've done this ad nauseum, then you needed a fairer system, and doing away with the protection but having 2 chances to get it, I think it's great. But you've just made an interesting point. Even though it's 30 and the top riders should never be out of the top 30, like you say, if they not quite firing on it yet for Q1, they make a small mistake, they got to go in Q2, and that's where they get the flat tire. You're like, shit. So maybe you want, that's why I said it should be 30 and 10 or whatever, or 30 and 20, it'd be 50 riders. But anyway, Alan, on that point, so some people might say, but if you go to Q2, you got an advantage. You're getting to go on the track again. I'll tell you as a rider, and I'm sure Alan will go with me on this. You don't want to go to Q2 unless you are forced there and it starts raining for Q2 and it's been dry all week and the race is going to be raining. Then Q2 gets an advantage. They see a wet track. But that's just like a freak thing, right? We'll see how often it happens. But that's my one interesting caveat, that it could become a cheeky advantage that you don't actually wish for before the day starts.
It's interesting because we had a test event in Portugal, and the idea of the test event was to shake out this schedule. And because of that, with the girls, with Gracie and Lena, I asked them not to do the second run because they could do 2 runs on qualifying day, but I wanted them to focus on a one and done approach. And Gracie, I think she was 3rd in her run, and then I was like, you're done for the day, cycle home, chill out, recover, ready for tomorrow. But all the other elite women went again, and it was interesting.
I saw that. It surprised me.
Yeah, so it was funny because they wanted the second bite at the cherry, and their times did get faster. And I think Gracie was a little bit like, "Well, hang on a second, why are they doing their second runs?" And I said, "Well, obviously we've got a strategy, and we're trying to work towards you getting used to that one run." I do think at the top level, when you look at run times, and using Danny as an example because he's really meticulous in logging every run that he does, generally a top elite rider does go faster the more time they spend on the track. So all things being equal, that extra run would be an advantage. But because you've got the top 20 that are taken out of it and they've got the time to recover, I think that it's a good shout, really. I don't think that you're going to see a huge jump. Or I don't think you're going to see the people who've done the LCQ having an unfair advantage. I actually think it's a good idea. And when you build the volume of training and the again going into a season, you're adding on a lot more extra runs across the year if you're always in that LCQ. So yeah, I think that it's not a bad thing at all. I like the idea of one less run. I think it's good for those who've had a problem, but we've been trying to get used to it and trying to actually prepare for that, really.
Yeah, and I was surprised that some riders went again. If it was like a mock test race, well, then why are they going up? But they didn't have that many riders, so there was that. But yeah, this off season there's been a lot of racing. Sven mentioned so many races. I feel like I've got 15 tabs open in my other browser of like race results, the teams, all these things. And
I've got them all
I
on one
started.
tab, Andrew.
Hey, what?
I've put them all onto one tab.
How do you put them on one tab?
I cut and paste to make a new document, and I got every race that's happened this year in front of me in like 2 scrolls.
Perfect. Cool. So you can give me what patterns you see, but what I do think is also happening is certain riders are not showing up to all of them. Jackson Goldstone has done one race. It's hardline. I stand to be corrected. I know he did a local one in Canada. So I don't know if that's just him because of the travel in Canada, probably more than not. But burning yourself out pre-season could be a risk for a 10-race series. I know it only starts in May, but maybe someone like Dunn with this injury, someone like Loic, they might start a little slower than they hoped for, just not enough reps, but they might be motivated later in the year versus, I don't know, who's raced a lot? Ethan Craig, but I do think he needs to because he's had a year off. So everyone's going to work differently. I'm sure Alan has to give different advice to every rider on his team. It's going to be totally different.
Yeah, it's what you're trying to get out of these preseason races. With Charlie's on this completely new bike, and he's wanted to get used to it and get used to riding it quickly. And he's been performing amazingly well. And using this Portuguese test event, I think Pinky had come off the back of maybe 3 races into that, or two back-to-back races into that. So he was definitely race ready. And some other riders, talking with Loic, he was very much there to just feel himself back into racing. It was impressive, his approach, that he could just focus on himself and he wasn't getting carried away, because as soon as you put some tape up and you say there's a stopwatch, everyone's suddenly like, well, I better be at the top of the timesheets. But some of the riders were very good at understanding there's bigger fish to fry. Let's work ourselves into the season and just get a feel for. I think you need racing to understand what the bike does at that next level. Everything steps up. The suspension needs to be made harder. You find weaknesses in the bike if you've not raced it, and that is something where these preseason races really come into their own. But if you come into the season off maybe 6 races, that's, can you keep that the mental stress of it is quite a lot for some riders. It's water for ducks back, but for others there certainly is challenges there. So getting that balance right is important.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. So Svenos, you've got your million tabs all on one page. What are the patterns? What patterns are you seeing? I guess we might as well start jumping into standouts, who's coming in hot, who our title contenders are, and then who's going to be our breakout. Hey, we made it onto race tapes with our breakout predictions. So that was cool. We called Dak and we called someone else, and we got both of them quite correct. So let's start bantering back and forth on who we think's got it, or is it going to be the old faithfuls?
Well, the most interesting thing you said was the Ronan and Jackson approach. Ronan admittedly was like riding more than any human being at full pace early. This is back in November already, December, January. And Jackson, it is surprising that he has only done the one race and the one that he took himself out on. I would have thought he would have done a few more, but he's such a smart, wise, mature racehead. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's probably logging times everywhere when he's not racing. So he's fine. And I think, to be honest, Ronan's injury is probably a blessing in disguise. And he probably would have been burnt out because he would have probably done all of these races, the US stuff, the Portuguese stuff, the Fort William, and he would have been like 10 races in by now. So I think, to be honest, and he did race the most recent one, and he did quite fine. He was like top 10. So that is nothing to worry about in terms of his, for the size of his injury, he was actually back on the downhill bike pretty quick. And I think maybe it'll make him hungrier and just start the trajectory again, rather than just be peaking, and at some point it's going to crash. But yeah, that hard line it is more of a race course, that hard line, versus the Welsh one, which is obviously it's also a race, but you can kind of predict more World Cup form on that track. But one of the these are like, I'll get into all the race results and what stands out. But one thing that stood out when I saw him in Tasmania is Asa is no longer a little kid. He's taller. Literally, in the 3 months I didn't see him, he probably grew an inch or two, and his shoulders went 2 or 3 inches, and his muscles. And if you think of Finn Isles, remember how small that kid was in first and second year junior? And look at the beast. He's like, he could be NFL guy now. He's actually cutting weight from 2 seasons ago because he got too strong for his own good, perhaps. So the future potential for a rider like Asa, where you do need to be strong, mostly also for hitting the dirt and hitting the injuries, he's obviously, and with the results we've seen, like he's one of the juniors that have had fastest results at some of the US racing. And then interestingly, we had the Alaran brothers take fastest time as well at another race. And also the Till, who's been sort of playing second fiddle to Max all season. Yet, interesting enough, when they were signed, he was thought to be the better racer, but he started all of last year off with a niggling shoulder, I believe it was a shoulder injury, that he was sort of getting strong all throughout the year. So mustn't forget, like, they got 2 weapons in the juniors, and this one is not necessarily, especially now, the slower brother has beaten the faster brother at the beginning of the season. But then, obviously Lackey's had tons of races, and it's yeah. There's some interesting notes is on the brand new bike, Tane beating Valley, and by all accounts that bike is, as you've seen, it's been hidden. It is a good bike that they're happy with and still doing testing. So that's going to be kind of one of the most interesting points for all of us, because every other bike, or Loics and them, have some changes to their bike, but that's the biggest new thing we're going to be seeing. But it's like Luke Meyer-Smith does good at home, and he always does good at home. He's had national champion title like 3 times in a row, and he beat Troy to get that again. And then Hattie beating Nina Hoffman in Fort William. Now, it was the craziest wind event, apparently, and we've all 3 of us have been in Fort William with probably the worst that we could say is the worst weather we've seen and the worst winds. And apparently this was even up there with it. And Hattie, everyone was surprised in seeding. I think she did 14 seconds, and in race she did like 4.5, almost 5 seconds into Nina. I think we can discount a little bit of it because the race runs were so wind affected. But also, let's not forget, Hattie went from a cross-country racer, like Lycra cross-country, to becoming enduro world champion in like less than 3 years. that step from XC to Enduro World Champion, who are riding more technical tracks than these downhill tracks, often at similar speeds, is a way bigger step than for her to go from Enduro to downhill. That step is going to be a lot easier for her, a lot different, and she will take time to get used to different training, this and that. But I think she's going to be an interesting threat in the elites. So that's, and she actually, as the Enduro World Champion, she didn't have any offers to race Enduro. She had 3 offers to race downhill, so she was quite in demand, but none to race Enduro. And but she has already become world champion, so it's maybe not a good change in her career to do something new and challenging and new goals in downhill.
I would say she's on my breakout for the women. I've got a few names there, and maybe I drop them and we just segue to the women. And before we go there, maybe the juniors, the elites are lucky those guys aren't all coming up, because we confirmed that Max, Till, and Asa are staying down. Correct, Alan?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Be going again.
But they've been racing elite, so they're like showing times at the same time of day. And is that for UCI points, would you reckon, Alan? Like they're helping the Muckhoff Commensal get UCI points by doing preseason elite races, right?
Yeah, I think for me, what's interesting is the juniors now are developing so quickly that their pace is really getting up there, comparable to elites. And with top elites racing the same races as these juniors, we can really see how they stack up. I think that I was at Fort William at the IXS Cup, and it's going to be really interesting to see how also the teams manage this. Cube were there; they had their riders there, and they've got a very, very promising young junior. She's coming in as a first-year junior called Rosa, and I think her time was actually faster than Jess Blewett. So it's going to be, Jess obviously is probably feeling her way into the track, and she's got her own, process. But from a team point of view, myself with young Lena, she's got the bit between her teeth. She wants to get these results, and I think you want to manage the elite riders and the junior riders together to get the most out of all of them, because there could be quite an atmosphere in some of these tents if the Alran brothers are pipping the seniors to faster times.
Yeah, you're definitely going to get pushed if you're an elite rider. I'll tell you that for free. You don't want the junior smoking you, let alone your teammates. So it's healthy competition, and I think the experienced riders need to just lean on that experience and trust that at a World Cup they'll have the pace, you know. And I think when I got late in my career, like I got smoked enough at small races or essay races, and there was just this like subconscious and conscious, like I got to World Cup, I was like, it's World Cup pace now. I just told myself that, and I rode differently. I just did.
I think I beat you at a South African race, Andrew.
I'm sure you have. I hope you did. That was probably your only chance.
No, I beat you other times, but we both had flats. I just rolled faster with my flat.
No, fair enough.
But you said about the juniors, another in the Canyon camp, we have first year junior Elitha. She beat Marine by 6 seconds. Now this was on, let's say, a home track for her, because she doesn't live there, but her parents, well, technically she does live there. Her parents, this is the level of investment in the youth in all sports, skateboarding, surfing, mountain biking. These kids are being recognized that they have talents, and partly because, none of our parents mountain biked, which got us into biking. Mine didn't. So, but all these parents have had high level riding. All these kids have had high level riding parents that recognize what they can do to develop the talent. I'm not saying they like soccer moms, soccer dads, where they're forcing them, but they definitely, making it easier. Her parents bought property near Windrock in Tennessee, and that is like the track that people do all the testing on, and some of the biggest US races happen on. So yeah, she did beat Miriam and Marine. So world-class field as a first-year junior, but she would have had some advantage with knowing the track really well. But also, she's also been at every World Cup last year, or pretty much nearly everyone. She was there walking the course every single race. So she knows the tracks, knows what they look like, knows the lines. So all these races that new for all these other first-year junior girls, she already knows them. She hasn't ridden on them, but she's like literally been at a lot of the World Cups. Not all, sorry. So, yeah, and there's just even more junior talent coming out of New Zealand. There's like 3 or 4 of them that would had top 5 elite times. Again, not just Tyler. There's a couple more coming through. Ollie Clark. There's a bunch. Yeah, the juniors is pretty soon you won't need to have a junior in an elite category. It'll just be a professional open category. I would say.
Oh, so go back in time like we used to do it, where Troy would just race elites and Sam Hill would just race elites, and I had to go race elites and see if I could make it. Okay.
But it is having the separate division which has helped spur this and build this talent and giving them opportunity and sponsorship and all the rest. So yeah, that is investing in the future of the sport, which is a good thing, and I'm all for. So yeah.
No, I mean, you said an interesting thing. Like, I'm watching the tennis Netflix on Alcaraz, a tennis player, like youngest world #1, and tennis has been famous for its soccer, all these academies. I mean, you send your kids off when they're young. Like, at least tennis, they're like in their teens. Soccer players, sometimes you go 11, 12, you might go to Manchester United Academy and stuff. So now with places like Windrock and Ride Creek, and I'm saying this is like Gwyn's generation that he's inspired, right? This is kind of the generation that grew up watching Gwyn dominate.
In the US,
then
anyway,
there's in the US, in the US, obviously Europe has their own like structure and all that stuff, but you're seeing in the US, like, that's kind of the similar to an academy. Is like, okay, well, let's move closer to where my kid can ride all the time and get reps. Now you got the Monster Pro Downhill Series, which we should definitely talk about, like someone like Gwyn, because of that, as well as more racing and the travel, he's going to race that whole series and do only 7 of the 10 World Cups. So it's kind of a tie-in to creating this other series, is giving people opportunity to race at a super high level in front of their sort of stars that they look up to. I mean, if I had that at home, I mean, I would have been a bit better, because I would have, like, I barely got to see Greg at home at a race. So I never got to even watch what it looked like for him to ride down a hill. So it's pretty damn awesome. And maybe as we get into this, I said an interesting point, and maybe I'll just put a bow in it. Like, it is super interesting that someone like Gwyn, because of that series, as well as, I think, getting older, wanting to stay home more, the travel to Europe is draining, is doing 7 of the 10 World Cups. Super interesting, because he can race the Pro Downhill Series supported by Monster. So that's super interesting. And we've got a few other riders that will do so. So I think that's exciting. But also, he potentially won't be in a title hunt if he does 7 of the 10.
No, but he does. He interestingly said on your podcast, which was a great 2-parter podcast, Andrew, he feels that he could have won Champeray that the year Danny won it. So and
I remember in the dry he had a good shot. Well, he said even in the wet, but
we've seen he can ride in the wet. Maybe not. He definitely got better riding in the wet. We saw what he did in Mont-Saint-Anne, but it would be interesting this year if doing less races and he is super fired and is like, you know what, this maybe is my last chance of winning a world champs,
Yeah, it could be cool.
And if he comes out to Champery and that'll be, that's the good thing about world champs. It is just a one-off event and it's like anything goes. Very interesting podcast. And then, like, there's, but you got to there's a lot of people in the US pushing US downhill, Clay Harper and Nico, what they've done for the riders in the sport. And it's good to see it on the up for sure. And let's develop more talent.
So Alan, with Gwyn, we potentially have said he's not in the title hunt, but maybe he does very well at the second one and he decides to do 9 of the 10. I don't know. Shall we go title contenders into breakout season and then go over to the women? So my money's, is your money not on Amaury? At current form, after what he did last year and the preseason, is that technically on paper the safe money for the title?
I'd say that you've got the great thing with the French riders who are still, I would say, the the ones that are holding the cards at the minute. You've got Loris, you've got Loic, and you've got Amory. I'd say Loic and Amory are so different in their approach. If you were just to go on raw speed and throwing everything at it, Amory's your man. But we've seen that he comes off and he's had his injuries, and maybe the more scientific Loic, where he seems to be a bit more calculated over this longer series. I think they're both going to be in the hunt. But I do think that there's some young riders that don't know anything different, as Sven was talking about with Ronan. I was out in New Zealand when Ronan was out there, and obviously working with Ronan, I'm often trying to put the reins on him a little bit and say, you know what, you're doing a lot, and everything you're doing is really high intensity. And like you alluded to, that injury at Hardline, it was quite a big injury, and it sort of allowed him to have a bit of a reset because his raw speed is so high. So you've got these riders, Lockie as well. He just doesn't know anything different apart from to go absolutely flat out. So you get a string of a few results come together, and I do think, as we've all seen in years past, you string a couple of results together and the momentum and that sort of wave can carry you through. And it could be that the series really does throw up quite a mixed top five. It could be there's quite a mix, trying to get someone who's used to their bike. We've got a lot of riders changing bikes, and we had Danny go one way on a setup, and he just couldn't generate speed. And it was fascinating because then after Portugal race was done, I'd ridden back to the hotel and we got a phone call from Greg, and Greg had said, I think we found something in the bike. You need to come back to the track. We're going to do some more runs. So we were doing runs at 5:30 that evening, and his times were race times and he was cruising. So you see what I mean? You need that bike to work with you. So I think that I don't know how Benoit's going to get on with that, Scott. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, and he's testing, but I thought maybe he'd have done more racing because of that. So there's so many question marks with bike, rider, and approach that are going to affect the overall standings.
Yeah, Alan, you know what's interesting? It made me think, like, with 10 races and how much talent and depth we had. Like, we haven't spoken about Troy with a 10 race series. Does that play into Troy's favor? You've got your wild cards done. Is Lockie going to break out, win one, and go on a tear, like momentum? You don't know. And I have a sneaky feeling it's going to be like Supercross. First few races,
yes,
everyone's there. And then we're going to be like, oh, shucks, we've lost so-and-so as well. Maybe a little bit less in Supercross, hopefully, but we might have one of those. We can have a crystal ball right now, and there's going to be so many variables with 10 race series, some new venues, things like that. People come back from injury. So I'm looking at that list I sent you guys, and I'm not going to get it right. But if we say Loic's coming back from injury, which I kind of didn't follow so closely.
I don't think it was too. I don't think
it wasn't
too bad.
Public. Oh, it wasn't too bad, and
yeah,
anyway. And then you've got Jackson as well. So you got to throw him in the title conversation. You got to throw Dunn in. You got to throw Troy. Do you throw Colburn? You throw Finn, Lockie, Danny? Like, anyone I don't mention is not disrespect from my side. It's just like there's so many guys before a season starts. We're like, okay, who could it be? But if I was to put money, I am gonna put your Loic, Amory, Troy, maybe. Just like someone that can get it done throughout a season.
And you've not even mentioned Loris.
I haven't mentioned Loris, and that's bad coming back from an injury, which could be similar to Loic. Loris is probably one of the biggest news signings going to Commensal. We actually should unpack Loris. Let's do that, Sven.
I mean, the Loris to Commensal was like definitely a surprise to me, but now seeing how the whole World Series teams are setting up and what it means for the future, 10 races, injuries. If you want to be guaranteed, if you're one of the top teams that are investing a hell of a lot of money, I mean, they've scrapped their enduro budgets, they've scrapped their advertising budgets. It's like these brands that are supporting these top tier teams, and there's of the 10 big ones, there's like 5 or 6 super big ones. the way their strategy is like, we can't afford Almery. Look what happened with Commensal Makov when they had Pom Pom and Almery injured. Luckily, at that point, Aprella was there and he took some wins. But with Specialized, they've got, they've got a different structure because they don't have any females, but they've got 3 elite men. Commensal Makov, they've double stacked the teams. They've got reserves, so to speak, but it's no longer A and B rider. You've got like 2 or 3 A riders on these teams, and they kind of need to have it to protect this investment. The end of this year, the team's goal is to get signed for 3 years, because that is when they can sign a bigger, potentially, hopefully, outside the industry sponsor, because they can guarantee like 3 years of being like a bit top tier team and everything. So what was actually the super surprising signing, and wondering how that would work between Loris and Omri, it is actually, it's actually a genius signing. It's not a surprising signing anymore. It makes sense. And those guys, even Loic, Loris has been teammates with all the greats. Been teammates with Greg and with Loic, and he's always got on with everyone. Like, he's never been the issue when he's changed teams. He's gone on to different teams he wanted more factory setup and more testing. He's gone on for different reasons, not, because he's been like kicked off the team. So like the team is working really well already, even though they haven't raced together that much, because, Loris is coming back. So, yeah, he was down in South Africa doing their launch video. So I think these super teams is kind of a little bit of the sign of the times, and there will probably be, this is the most important year to have the super team, so the teams can get guaranteed, and yeah, it'll maybe take a bit of pressure off some of all the riders, that they know they don't need to, that the whole team's future is banking on them alone. So maybe they can ride a bit freer and not have unnecessary crashes or injuries, because they like feel the weight of the team shoulder, on their shoulders, So yeah, but yeah, it will be interesting to see the team dynamic. I know some teams, like when who gets to choose the hotel room at the next race is based on like who gets the win, and who gets to share the room with the mechanic that snores, based on like the results the weekend before. Although none of these teams are probably sharing rooms with the mechanics.
But you make a really good point.
Yeah, go for it, Alan.
I think Sven makes a really good point there, because if you've got, essentially, you're taking the alphas and you're putting, in Makov Commensal's case, you probably have 4 of them. And then you've got Pom Pom. So you've got the 2 junior boys who are hunting the 2 elite men. And you've got to, as a manager and as someone working within the team, you have to create an environment where they can get the most from it. Because if they're walking into that tent and it's like, I've got to fight for my place in this tent all the time, that's quite a stressful environment to be in. And you need to still create a nurturing environment there to go, we're here to get the best out of you. And obviously characters are different. Mondraker, you've got Dakota, who's out at the moment with quite a big injury. I don't know when he's quite going to be there to come back, but what Dakota needs from the team is clearly different to what Pinky and Ronan need from the team. And then they've grown again with Greg Williamson joining and Veronica joining. So a lot of these teams are going to have to work with their riders a lot more, because it's so much bigger. Gone are the days, when you and Danny were in a sprinter van. It's a very, very different thing. That was a world-class team, a very, very good setup, but everything's just quite literally tripled in size. But you still, as the rider, need that focus, support, and feeling like the team are there to put their arm around you, not just you're there to get a result. Because on the good days, it's brilliant, but on the bad days, that could be a hard tent to ride back in after you've underperformed. So
that's an interesting fact. Yeah. I mean, I felt it when I was just one person on a team, but if you've got a lot of those riders doing well, so say the juniors are doing well, Miriam's doing well, and then either Amri's doing well or Loris is doing well, but the other one's not, that's tough, because there's no excuses. You can't hide behind the bike, you can't hide behind the support, you can't hide behind anything. There's just no excuse if everyone on the team's doing well. So that'll be interesting. But I do think that clearly they've got a relationship, and they both, base themselves in Andorra. Obviously, we know about Loic and Loris's relationship more. But like you said, I think Loris he's such a nice guy. I mean, I can't tell you how polite he was about coming to ride at our bike park, and he was doing the communication because the filmers spoke less English, and just with the landowner, he was just like, oh, he's such a nice guy, and it's crazy how fast he is. So
The
I think he'll do well there. I think he'll. One question mark I have is I don't know who's going to be his mechanic. He had a great relationship with the mechanic that's now taken a step
Pierre,
back, right? Pierre.
yeah,
So
he's got a family now, so
he's got a family. So,
but
and that's tough as well, right? Alan, like, we love it. We're like, yeah, more races, but yeah, it's grueling out there, hey. So, and there's not as much money to go around to pay the staff. They're working their asses off. So, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is you've got to manage that team, and I forget the word, but the culture. I think you've got to really set a good culture to get through a grueling 10 race series, which we keep coming back to. You mentioned Mondraker, so they added Greg Williamson, but otherwise and Veronica, you said. But what will be interesting is Pinkerton's been doing very well at home and overseas, but he sometimes seems to ride over his head in the finals. Do you think with time this is maybe the season where it all starts clicking? He's got Lopes in his corner. He's got the team. He's clearly got the speed. I kind of feel I want to put him on the breakout question mark. Yeah,
yeah, I think sorry, going Pinkerton, yes. Going back to the teams thing, the key thing is if they perform as proper teammates. Now, let's say Loic and Finn operate a little bit more independently of each other. They do have shared resources on the track, but if these riders ride as true teammates, you've only got so many runs on the track, and if you can try out in one practice run, riders doing line A, line B, and then you have the manager's timing right then and there, you've got two race winning riders, so you've got equal speed riders. That line gets decided right then and there. Sure, some lines will suit a certain style of riding, but if the riders train, not necessarily train together, but train as a team and share information, and each one will have different strengths and weaknesses on each course. As a team, they can both benefit. And then when it comes to the race, then whoever has the best race run. So I don't think there will be much hiding lines from teammates, where I know that has happened a few teams before. I even heard it wasn't so like, and this is a pretty big team, where they like left shock settings on the table, but it was fake shock settings.
they did
So
not.
like, yeah, but this is like a couple of years ago when you had like these bigger personalities that were like.
So why are you talking about Greg like that? Was it Greg? Because I can give him shit now.
It wasn't,
because he's just
it wasn't Greg. It was a different team. It wasn't on the
No,
same
I'm
cruise.
teasing.
But there's like one of those rare instances where you like but I think, yeah, working as a team.
No, man, we all did that, dude. There was always times where you're like, yeah, I'm going to take it easy, go hard. You're like, yeah, I'll do this line. And we're like, you're not doing that line in the race. Come on, even to your teammate. But when it works well, it works very well. Alan was mentioning when Danny and I started clicking and we were sharing resources, and Oscar, and when Alan was there, we cut through the noise, we cut through the doubt, and we helped each other. And you obviously have to realize, like, okay, Danny likes that line. Doesn't mean I'm going to be able to ride it or whatever. But when you are able to share those resources, and I think it's going to be way more critical than usual with the schedule. That's an interesting point for sure.
And just to piggyback that, Andy, Kolb, and Charlie were fantastic at that for a number of years, sharing lines, working well together, riding together, and now that relationship has split in a way. They're still really good friends, and there's no drama there. But Andy going on to a different team with Oisin, and Charlie sort of being the number one rider very clearly on the Athertons. It will be interesting to see whether they'll try and link up in practice and almost do that, continue riding together like that, because like Sven was saying, he makes such a good point. In downhill, the riders that realize that it isn't necessarily a zero-sum game. If I win and you're second, we've both done really well. That's great for the team. That's great for us. It shouldn't be I win, you lose, or vice versa. So the people that can ride together, there's times when, like you say, that you need to get the data and the information, which is the best line. Let's work together and cut through it. We can both benefit, and then pat on the back if you've done a better run than me. And I'd like to think there would be more of that, and it works well. So these team environments, if it works well like this, brilliant. If you've got the junior beating the elite and you walk in and there's drama and I don't want to share a room with you and I don't want to travel home in the transfer bus with you, it could be a long year ahead. So it'll be interesting.
I'm going to throw a cat amongst the pigeons since we're talking about Charlie. Who is going to be the first person to win that 100,000? And do you share it with the team? Do you share it with the? Okay, there's that. Okay, so are you going to go? Are you going to?
I stole that from Alan. I stole that joke from Alan.
I keep messaging Rachel, and like she did. What did she just do recently?
They'll pay for a lot of school fees in college. Let's go.
She got second. She got second at Sea Otter, and I like congratulated her, and I was like, "Hang on, if you would race Sea Otter, which all top downhillers hate to race because it's like literally like an enduro sprint, for her to get second at Sea Otter, she just said, "Oh, it's just Sea Otter. It doesn't count as downhill." I'm like, actually, Rachel, if you can get a second at Sea Otter, that's way more impressive to me than you coming to get a top 5 at a downhill World Cup, because it means you have drive, determination, you are in some kind of fitness. Sure, you're not the same level of competition, but like I don't think even Ben Lovell and the team knows if she's going to do a World Cup at this point, but she's probably hasn't requested a number, but she probably doesn't even know if she's going to do a race or not, and she might just do a race and then she might just win it. But there's quite a lot of people that's running that Belts Drive gearbox bike, and it is it's pretty cool to see, because all the guys on the light bikes, the Scots and the Santa Cruzes, have been putting like weight, exactly the weight of a gearbox where a gearbox is. So and I know when I ride my e-bike, North American audience is going to hate any e-bike talk, but on downhill trails that are a certain like consistency, the center of gravity and the mass and the traction and the grip, pedaling aside, it is faster. So on some tracks, so it is it's no longer a disadvantage, and especially with the electronic shifting in the gearboxes, it's and cool to see like a lot of other brands step into that, that side of things. A few surprises for all of us at the end of last season who's moved on to it this year. Not just the Zeroeds, and the Gamex.
Yeah,
that is definitely a topic for this podcast. That is new for 2025. We've got Atherton's, Gamox with Reese, and the Intense, obviously Zeroed, who's is MS Racing on them, correct?
Yes.
So that's four bikes with riders, you would argue, depending on the day. Well, hang on. Didn't MS win last year anyway, around in Leger?
Not on a gearbox bike.
Not on a gearbox.
No, not on a gearbox bike, but just
Farina, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Farina,
Eleonora.
yes, thank you. Look, excuse me, there's been so much information to our process coming into the podcast and while we're talking, but we've got some race-winning, capable riders on bikes that on the right track, someone posted, was it the bike?
He can win
He can win a race and he's got a bike depending on the track. Like, which one is more important, the ride or the bike? And then I think I text Chris, I said, well, what about both? Depending on the track, and if the rider suits the track, then and the bike's working better, then it's freaking helpful.
I mean, these days, I would say for all the top riders and top teams, the bikes are all, they all got good product. Let's say it's good suspension.
No, that's what I was saying. Both. Bikes. He's like, oh, is it the gearbox that helped him win Fort William? I was like, how about both? Like Charlie is fast down there on a farm gate, and then you give him a bike that also works. He's faster. So, yeah, that's pretty damn interesting. And that brings us to Reese and launching his own team, going gearbox. Look, there's a level of bias, and like everyone's like, once you get on a gearbox bike, that's the only bike that should have ever been made, apparently, if you talk to anyone that's riding one. So there's a level of like, drinking the Kool-Aid there as well.
For sure. I think there are still some kinks to work out with the gearboxes, but considering how good when you look at Charlie's bike, it just looks like an HRC Honda ready to go. This looks proper. It's an impressive piece of kit that they've put together. And I think, I don't know the ins and outs of this belted purse situation, but don't forget the girls race before the boys. They in the time schedule, the girls race
Someone's
first, and then the
going to
boys
win on the
race.
same weekend. Yeah.
So
Do they have to split the money?
What happens? I think that
Probably split the money if it's the same weekend.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
then
would argue it's the same weekend, so it's the lady was first, so ladies first. Maybe they get the cash.
Maybe they get the cash.
Interesting technicality. I don't know the gentleman over there, so we're going to have to get some info on that.
Yeah.
Atherton Racing have had Rachel and Rachel and Charlie winning on the same weekend many a time. So
many a time.
It can happen again.
So it'll be. I think that, to me, there's so many. It's a logical progression that we've all banged on about for such a long time, is centralizing that mass, getting rid of that awful rear mech that's swinging around at the back, having something that is not only, well, this weekend gone, poor Hugo Marini came up to our truck and was like, I've got no rear mech. I've just smashed my rear mech off and I've got a race run in 20 minutes. Is there anything you can do? And I happily loaned him a rear mech to go racing. And that's sort of, to me, it was like quite a funny thing, because that is such a common problem that we all go through. You smash it on a rock and it's toast. And I think that the gearbox certainly has a lot of benefits, and the development that they've been able to put in, I think almost it's because the shackles have come off a little bit. If you go back 10 years, it was the two big S companies that were controlling most teams, and they sort of had a handle on it. But now that the input of those companies isn't quite as big, and they haven't got those handcuffs on quite as much, so there are a number of teams that feel, hey, you know what, we're going to go this direction. There's a lot of interest in it. And from my understanding, if it is claggy mud, there are problems. But if there's not claggy mud, you're okay. So
that is a potential downfall, is claggy mud, and then depending on track, probably carrying speed and weight, and then on other tracks that's a pro. So depending on the track, but claggy mud can cause an issue there with shifting or potentially derailing a belt. What are you hearing that you're allowed to talk about?
That's my understanding, and this isn't it's worth saying this hasn't come from Charlie or Charlie's bike. This is from some other riders that I know have been on this, and they've had problems with the belt being thrown off. So I think that you can cover it.
Yeah, you have mechanics that do all sorts of, like, they see these problems and they thrive on it, and they come up with these ingenious solutions to them. People used to cover with the little tin cans the back of the disc brakes for the mud, and now we're seeing more front rotor fenders coming onto downhill bikes in even just slight rain. Also the whole drive and the gearbox thing is maybe because the suspension platform that a lot of people are shifting to over the last 2-3 years, that the mid-high idler pivot bikes work well in a gearbox configuration. So it's also opened up that kind of suspension platform first. You choose your suspension platform and then your drivetrain, and these two actually work hand in hand nicely together, which is a bonus. So
those are some great points. I mean, I feel like at the top level, one race run, even in the muddiest conditions, I would hope. I mean, the bike's going to be prepped clean before, as Sven said. They'll maybe figure out ways to get less mud in there. So I wonder if we'll have an issue in a race run, but time will tell. That's why we go racing. If it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen in a race run. But it is awesome to see the industry step up, or outside industry and industry step up for that sort of prize purse. So if people aren't aware, there's $100,000, anyone on a belt-driven bike, or that Gates belt-driven, for winning the first World Cup. So that's awesome. That's very cool. And that might be the financial backing Reese needs, because, putting a team together in this economy is not easy. He's been very excited about it. It's an interesting time. I think it was for both parties seemingly happening at the same time. Trek looking to rebuild, those riders not staying on board. So it's exciting for both teams. I think Trek, you would say, oh, they don't have these huge named riders. But there was a time when Trek launched Trek World Racing, and this man himself was not a huge name and got the call up. Me and Justin had great 2 years there. So it is awesome to see them sort of invest in the future. But we could have
Yeah,
a
they got a
breakout
young
win. And Matt Walker has won a title before, and he had great pace at the end of last year. So I think that team is a lot more exciting than it potentially looked as they launched it. Does that make sense?
and Lackey was winning Poland
True.
until he
Yeah, yeah.
didn't, and
Yeah,
and this is the first race of the season. So
on a Trek.
yeah, exactly. And then they've kept the with Ollie being on board as well. They've kept that dynamic that worked so well with the union, even spread over 2 years. And interestingly enough, the union sort of lives on with it's evolved into Joe Bowman doing athlete management as well. So that's good to see, things end and other opportunities arise or new other things begin, which was, if anyone doesn't know, that's Joe Bowman who put together the union over the last couple of years. Has done an amazing job identifying, developing talent and getting the results. And now, because of that vision, it's a perfect fit doing sort of an athlete management company alongside his Steel City Media. One other name I just wanted to, just looking at some of the New Zealand results, it's not just that she won, it's but who she beat and about how much. But Jenna Hastings, since becoming junior world champion, she's kind of sort of like when you transition from being the top junior to the top into the elite, it's a bit, other than a Valley and a lot of the junior men these days, it's a bit harder, I'd say, in the junior women's field to make that transition. And Eris was about to do that this year as well. It's a big jump. But she's now sort of found her feet and her speed, and when I've said to Bernard, I said, wow, she's definitely looking a lot different at the beginning of this season in this off-season races than she has at any point in her career, based on who she's been beating and how much. So she's obviously she said, I know all Bernard said is like they don't train together and he just likes to do lots of runs, where she's like now putting in the strength training in the gym and all the other stuff. So whatever she's doing to her training this year, it's definitely paid off in her early season results, and hopefully they can carry on through to the World Cups.
Yeah, I had her as a breakout question mark. Can this be the season that all things? She's clearly got the talent. She had the potential. I did see them on a ride in the Surrey Hills, and part of me, I don't know if she was burnt up, but it just seemed like maybe she hadn't got that piece of the puzzle quite sorted, the training or the sacrifice. And maybe that's happened in the off season and it's paying off, which is great, is when it pays off that quickly. Then you're even more motivated to train harder, I think, as Alan will see. So I had her as breakout, and I think she's showing the speed. Then you got Jess Blewett, Gracie Hemstreet with a great result at Mount St. Anne. And then maybe we have to add a few. Reese, if she's back, Phoebe, and Lisa Bauman. It's going to be an exciting, and then we haven't mentioned
Cami on the new Yeti.
The top, yeah, but I would probably put her as, a title contender, named rider. Is she going to be back with your Miriams? Is she going to back with your Valley? And then Marine, who won the last round, that's a big signing for her to move on. It's a loss to Scott, but I think they really win with Benoit. I think Benoit, Scott, a new bike, I think that's a great fit.
And Flo Paye, I think he's going to work really
Flo,
well with Flo.
Flo as connecting them, and I'll hope to see them at some races. But I'm following along closely. Obviously, I want them to do well, but I really see that with the new bike and that support from Scott, I think it'll be
Ethan
great.
being fully, he missed essentially another whole season due to injury, and that happened with him on GT as well. So, and his injury came at the right time, that he's had a full off season to build. So, so he's going to be another fast teammate. So it's not just going to be a one horse race in the Scott camp either.
No, I think those two will do well today. I don't think they don't seem to have big egos, and with Flo there, very chilled. Dylan is racing, but I don't know at what capacity. He's also not got a huge ego, so I think that culture should work well for Benoit. So I'm obviously biasly excited to see what's going to happen there, and obviously a new bike on the circuit is great. We've got a few of those. So we've mentioned breakouts. I'll check my notes, but what we should speak about, Sven alluded on the ladies, but the men, we've got enduro riders coming back to downhill with Martin Mays, with
Richie
FMD
Rude.
Orbea and Richie
And,
Rude.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
Martin
what do
was.
we make of that?
It was great to see Martin in Portugal, just looking at home. Really, it doesn't seem as though we go back to La Bresse where he won.
Yep,
Did he beat everyone in La
correct.
Bresse? And he was literally on an enduro bike and just had an off weekend. So it's no surprise. He was junior bronze medalist on a downhill bike when I was working with him on the Athertons. So he's always had this really strong link to downhill, and I think he'll slot straight back in. I was wondering how he'd fit in with that team, because obviously it's like a pre-existing team that he's joining, and it's a little like, to me, it was almost like Mark Beaumont when the Atherton signed with GT. Sort of, he kind of came with the package, but it worked really well. And I think from all accounts, Martin's fitting right in there, and his work ethic stands him in good stead. And I think he knows the Orbea guys really well in terms of the development of the bike, so he can probably help there. But I think he'll do really well. Richie, I don't think Richie was quite getting those results on the downhill bike when he was racing enduro. I may well be wrong here, but I think when he focuses fully on something, that he's going to be strong. And it's great to see riders coming to downhill, and I hate to say it, but probably at the right time. As it's a real shame that the focus seems to be going away from enduro.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it coming to at the right time, but you are right. It's sad, like you said. It's sad that they need to have, like their passion. Like Jack Moyer made the switch kind of because he had to, but when he did make the switch, he preferred the format and the riding and the racing in enduro. And I thought maybe he'd be one of the riders we'd see back on the downhill bike, because he almost won Aussie national champs last year. And it is sad, and maybe this is the big reset year for enduro, and see how they package it in terms of for the spectators, because at the venues the racing has always been good. A few questionable venues in the past, and one or two still this year, but hopefully this is the big reset. Everything has been kind of brought smaller, and maybe this can be the year zero of a reset of enduro. Let's see how that goes. Hopefully so. I mean, one of the you have the world champs being spread over 3 weekends for all the disciplines, 5 or 6 mountain bike disciplines, and sadly we have world champs enduro happening at the same time as Leger World Cup. They race on a Monday, so you have, how can you be like racing on a Monday at a world champs level and expect the sport to be shown to the masses, and the practice, nobody in the mountain bike media is even going to be there in the practice, because Leger World Cup's going to be happening when the practice day is on. It's going to be the finals of the downhill finals. Leger downhill finals day is practice day for the enduro, a couple of 100 Ks away. So it's sad that in a year, when you have 7-8 months of racing, that happens schedule wise, especially when Warner Bros. Discover are in control of the whole schedule, and they have so many empty weeks, 5 empty weeks again mid-season, that does happen. It's quite short-sightedness. I mean, there's reasons. The regions have their weekends, they want to do things, and that there's all these constraints, but you can't be competing with your own events for eyes and spectators and sponsorship dollars and viewership and industry support. Shimano, SRAM, Fox have to send people everywhere, multi places. Not easy in this sort of tough time in the bike industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's downhill's gain, but it's enduro's loss. Like, if you say those guys are not doing around this year, that's Richie Rude and Martin Mays. Those are two of the biggest names in enduro. That's why I would tune into enduro. Like the way Richie rips apart
and Hattie
enduro bike down, and on the ladies' Hatton. So I have heard from sources that they are not trying to kill enduro, and with the 2 days format, the riders are pumped and they've had meetings. And yeah, the byproduct is they've lost some riders in this sort of lull of exposure of it, and teams saying, well, we're going downhill, so if you want to ride, do you want to do downhill? So it's super interesting. um, but as Finn said, yeah, there's obviously, you would hope they don't put it on a Monday, but that's, if it's at Worlds, that's a UCI decision as well. And unfortunately, they're not prioritizing it because there are other events that are on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but that might be track cycling, that might be this, that. So I'm definitely not in that room, but it is sad. It is sad because it is a cool sport, and there's riders we know. And Sven, you go to a lot of these events, and those are some of the most gifted riders I've seen on a bike. Martin Mays. I mean, I remember the one year we get to Ciota, Martin Mays is there. Maybe that's when they were on GT. And he's entered the slalom. I'm like, okay,
Mm,
cool. And next thing, Martin Mays wins the slalom. I was like, oh, I don't think I've ever seen him race a slalom. And that's just how good he is on a
exactly.
bike, how adaptable he is. So that'll be cool. It's definitely a talking point. We've gone through a lot of the injuries. Have we had more injuries in the off season? Is it just coincidence? Is the level of riding and speed and preparation these riders feel they need to do before a World Cup? I mean, there were years where Greg Menard did not ride a lot of downhill before the first World Cup. I just raced some local races at home. I wasn't that out of my comfort zone. I think the level of preparations at incremental gains and people realizing they've got to be firing on all cylinders come the first race.
Yeah, the also with the testing, if you've got a new bike and you're trying to develop the bike, then it makes sense to have camps, have team camps where there's people there, and then with that you're riding with your teammates, and with that you're increasing the pace. And unfortunately, there's no room for error on a downhill bike. You know, there's a lot of furniture in the way when you come off a bike. So it can have these injuries, and trying to make it work through the season is important, but also turning up well prepared is important. So I think we are hopefully able to manage this, and I think trying to manage the riders as well, not to risk everything. You know, if you're testing something, you need consistent runs. They don't have to be absolutely on the limit, but then if you go too slowly, you're going to set up a bike that's going to be brilliant when you're doing a cycle lap, but as soon as you build up pace, it's going to be too soft. So it's certainly an evolving situation, shall we say.
Yeah, that makes sense. There are definitely times, if you have the experience, you know what you're there for, testing and maybe a little bit shorter track so you manage the fatigue. But try telling Dunn not to test it 10 out of 10. I mean,
Yeah.
just chatting to him in South Africa, he just loves, he just reminds me of Danny Hart from back in the day. He just does, just loves riding his bike. And, you know, that's a dangerous combination. If you've got that skill, work ethic, and you just want to do more runs than anyone else, you're going to get those reps. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Finn, there was an injury there as well. What was his off season? I mentioned something about getting back on the bike, so he had a little niggle as well. Does anyone know about that,
Yeah,
or am I
he
just
keeps
spreading
a
rumors?
no. He he was definitely riding a bunch early in the off season, and then it seems like he's a little bit off the radar. Um, yeah, I don't know about Finn. We exchange messages back and forward. It's usually when I see him on holiday somewhere nice, and we like just, especially when he's in New Zealand. But I was just looking up something else while you guys were talking about new riders coming back, just to kind of put in perspective. Richie Rude and we would all agree when he switched to enduro, we thought that's crazy. He doesn't have the right build and physique, and he's too big for enduro. But he proved us all wrong. And I wonder with riders like him and Martin, if they do switch and specialize their training to downhill. I mean, Richie Rude beat riders like Loris Viget, Lucas Shaw. So these are all this is the age and the sort of that class and the year. So they're, 30 years old, kind of maybe at their peak of experience and physicality for downhill. So, and 10 years of racing experience. It doesn't matter whether you're racing downhill or enduro. If he switches his focus to downhill, um, that's the year and who he was racing when he won Junior World Champ. So he's right. He's not coming back to it too late. He still has, I think, potential. I'm not going to say he's going to come out and get on the podium straight away, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did podium this year in the latter half of the season.
If you were working with him, Alan, what would you guys be working on to change from enduro? And I understand there's a bit of a training aspect, but I'm like, he'll figure that out. It's the intensity. It's like timed runs, speed.
I think it will probably be the
he's not going to be lacking fitness, right?
No. I think it will be just getting that downhill bike set up and getting the bike. A downhill bike is so much more capable than an enduro bike. Is probably just trying to figure out getting the bike set up for him. But I think these enduro boys have got an advantage in terms of their race mentality, because if they're racing X number of stages per event, they're basically having, this is an absolutely critical race run, and they're doing it multiple times a weekend, where a downhiller might only do it twice. You've got a qualifying run and a final run. So they're getting a lot more time against the clock than a downhiller, which I think they can bring to downhill. So I think from that point of view, that they won't be phased by, I need to make it happen now. Where I think some downhillers are great in practice, but not always when it really counts.
I say all the enduro guys come in on the LCQ because they miss that top 20, and then all the enduro guys will make their quality LCQ the whole year long.
That is we should clip that, because I think you'll be very accurate, because they might not have that spark pace, like Q1.
But then they'll see what the pace is, and
then they'll see what the pace is, and they've got the racecraft, and they got the talent, and there you go. Yeah, I can't wait. That's something I want to tune into. Well, anyway, came up with the idea with Bernard Kerr in April. I at least told him about it, April 2023. So I'm excited to tune in. Like there's 10 spots. Who's going to make it? Dude, is that live broadcast or what?
I was going to say, wouldn't it be nice, like year one of Warner Bros. Discovery, when they broadcasted Quali 1 on YouTube for free, and then the race was paid for? That would be cool, with everyone complaining about the rising costs for some regions. Like, it's got a lot more expensive.
Yeah, give us some free shit.
It's got a lot more expensive to watch downhill. So if you're a fan committing, it would be nice to get to watch the LCQ for free on YouTube, you know what I mean? And then maybe they would get more people subscribing to the big race,
I agree.
Well, of course, because that's the freemium model. That's the free app that works for a week, or you get certain things like Spotify ads, and you're like, oh, this is a really cool app.
Cameras are up there with the cameraman. They've recorded the guys doing the quali anyway.
I don't think that'll add a huge cost, but I'm not in the room. So a couple things here. That, to me, I don't know the cost, but if I was in the marketing room, I think that's an easy win, to give the core fans like a little token. Thank you for supporting. And if you're in Ireland,
they still never get to watch the top 20. They keep qualifying top 20.
Well, you got to pay your £30 or whatever it is.
And that's fair enough. Yeah.
I'm not in that region, so I don't think I have to pay that much. So I'm not going to get too annoyed on that. That's exciting. That is a cool thing. If you see it on YouTube, you could maybe gain more followers. Then I was watching the Live PGA debacle, right? I know it's golf, but it's actually marketing. And then you watch the behind the series, and you watch the new CEO that's come in from NBA, I want to say, and he calls a player-only meeting. He leaves all the executives outside, and they allow some of the cameras in there. And he says, he's working with the players. What do you want? This is our growth strategy. This is where you fit in. This is where we want to be in 5 years. This is where we want to be in 10 years. And you can see the players like buying into that, because they've got to keep those players. Obviously, they sign contracts, and it's a whole different thing. And then I also saw the PGA Tour spokesperson go on a podcast and communicate about some of the decisions they've made that a lot of the fans don't like. And it led me back to like, there seems like there's some easy wins. One of them being, elephant in the room, we haven't spoken about the 3-rider versus 5-rider podium. I thought Sven would have brought this up already.
No, but thank you for raising it.
So it's out there. I'm not bringing anything up new. The riders all petitioned. A lot of XC riders and downhillers followed suit. 61 odd downhillers, 120 odd XC riders, just if some of the fans aren't quite caught up. because in the off season, and I've just been reading the press release, the riders' representative claims that they were against the rule change going from 5 down to 3, and their voice was not heard in the meeting, but it went to 3 riders. Now, I understand they want to be similar to other cycling disciplines, but all the conversation out there is, but mountain biking is different. Mountain biking is 5.
You,
It's always been 5. Like, you're taking away the history of the sport. I'm
yeah,
wondering, I'm not in the room. It just seems like an easy win to let the riders have a 5-rider podium. You don't even have to put it on TV. You can put the
you know,
3-rider after the race on TV and then do the 5-rider big one. Okay.
well, they and they
Context
kind of have
over.
done that. They kind of have done that at a few races when they didn't have the podium so close to the finish. They would
True.
do the hot seat. So they had the hot seat riders, and that was the kind of, they had a flower ceremony, which was kind of essentially for the live TV. That was the podium. And what I'm most surprised with, and also the two things, why did when this rule was very first proposed, the rule change, why was there not an immediate kickback then? Why was it the weekend of the opening round in Brazil before any kind of organized kickback came? There's that. And then two, I can almost understand Warner Brothers' discovery argument for it in cross country, which is an Olympic discipline. Downhill is not an Olympic discipline, probably will be someday in the not too distant future. But at the moment, it's not an Olympic discipline, so we can have whatever kind of podium we want. This is, 20 years. The riders have had bonuses cut. If you're not, the bonuses went to the top 5. Now cut quite a few teams' bonuses go to the top 3. And sneakily, they quietly did away with this. 3 years ago, the overall World Cup used to give 5 trophies of those glass trophies. And then 2 years ago, without a word to anyone, no prompt to anyone, they just switched to, this is Monsanan, I think it was when Finn won 2 years ago. They just suddenly had 3 riders, and they were literally the 4th and 5th place in the overall riders waiting, and they just were never called up. And that was never communicated to anyone that was going to happen 2 years ago. And this is in the World Cup overall, so different 2 podiums. So they kind of been secretly, or not secretly, but quietly kind of getting in the direction they want to get for whatever reason, because there is no upside to me to having a 3-person podium, especially in downhill.
Just like people sprinkling their homes, it's also a great time to reset your body and routine. Whether you're heading into warmer days or still shaking off winter, feeling good starts from the inside. And for me, that starts with AG1. I've always cared about my health, whether it was during my racing days or now, juggling travel, work, riding, the little one, and everything in between. But even with the best intentions, I don't always get the nutrition I need. That's why I love AG1. It's so easy. One scoop, I mix it up in 60 seconds, and boom, I'm covering my bases with 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and more. No more cabinets full of random supplements. I hate that. Just one simple habit that actually sticks. With daylight savings kicking in for some, those brighter mornings are a great time to dial in your routine. Whether you're waking up to crisp spring air or full-blown summer heat like I am in South Africa, AG1 helps me shake off the grogginess and get going. Plus, it actually tastes good, which makes it easy to stay consistent. This time of year, we're all getting outside more, riding, traveling, just being more active. AG1 makes it simple to support my body, whether I'm at home or on the move with the travel packs. Listen to this. It's been tested for over 500 herbicides and pesticides, made with no artificial junk, and it's NSF certified for sport, so I trust what's going into my body. Best of all, there's a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. Right now, you get a free bottle of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs at a $48 value for free when you go to drinkag1.com/moving the needle, or click the link in the show notes. That's drinkag1.com/moving the needle to simplify your routine and feel your best this season. Start with AG1.
To maybe to wrap it up, or no, that's your job to wrap it up, Andrew. But a couple of riders, Gwyn has spoken about it. Obviously, Greg has first choice, Gwyn second choice on race numbers and career numbers for riders racing. And my question to Gwyn has chosen number 7, an old BMX number and a lucky number for a lot of people. But Alan, has Greg thrown his hat in the ring to claim he'd be number one pick of what number he can choose? Because
I'm
if he
not
has, he has to race.
I think he has. It's the way they've done it has been like I've not had a lot to do with it, to be honest. I know Danny's picked his and he got the number he wanted, and I think Greg has been involved with that chat. So we'll see if he straps a number board on. There may be something in that. I can't.
What number would Greg take, Andrew? You know Greg as well as anyone.
He will take 27.
He can't take number one.
I think 27's one of his lucky numbers. I think it's like a gambling number. He won World Champs on 13, so he could be weird and do 13.
Yeah.
So there's that, sure. But I mean, I don't know. Alan would know more than me. Are you saying if he picks a number, it means he's on the roster, so he could do a fill-in if there's an issue?
If he's officially picked a number, you can only pick a number if you're racing that year. Otherwise we'd have no.
Well, I mean, you could pick the number and then not race, and it falls away the following year. Like the same as for US Open, I get to pick a number if I'm a current rider.
You can't just. We're not in good spirit to just hold on to a number. So
dude, it's Greg Minnaar. What are you talking about? Sort of good spirit. Give him a number for a year.
He wants some custom kits, some sweet custom kits made with his with his favorite number, like how Petey had 7 different retirement paint job bikes. That was the biggest. I'll call it like heist, but also the best marketing I've seen. Like Petey's retirement year was amazing. He got you retire and you can keep these bikes or sell these bikes. Steve Pete had 7 one of a kind, amazing, or 6 one of a kind paint jobs. Can you imagine? And I don't think he kept all 6 of those.
Yeah, he did it right because normally it's like
There's
last
a few
race
wealthy collectors in Asia.
Like Greg had the last race, all stressful with the rules changes and then a party. Petey basically had every race as a party.
Was a party.
And a retirement race. Yeah. Was a retirement race. That was pretty cool. So did you guys wrap up the podium chat while I had an internet debacle? So that's wrapped up.
We'd pretty much got to. We'd gone through most of the things, and it's 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks away from the first World Cup, and we can't wait.
I mean, just devil's advocate, that would be an easy win for you guys to give the riders, but then do the riders push for more stuff, and then you have the whole other noise. So I don't have to deal with it. Alan's probably had to deal with it subtly behind the scenes. I can see both sides. They're obviously one of us let's just keep it the same as every other cycling discipline. What's this weird 5-rider podium? But there's this history, all the record books. Does that mean one of my podiums doesn't count? Actually, don't know. I'm gonna keep it. So it's just interesting.
So far, the cross country riders have twice unofficially jumped the fence. And there's videos of behind the scenes videos of the security and staff trying to stop Nino and them getting on the stage and copped a fine. Will the downhillers have enough? I don't want to say
balls. You're allowed to say balls.
Well,
aren't you?
Have enough guts.
Downhillers. There's ladies. Excuse me.
Male and female to jump on that podium and do the old 5-man podium. But then, as a photographer, what do you do? Which one do you use, or as a team? But and just have the wheel. Everyone said they'll gladly crowdfund the fines for the year. You can probably find a sponsorship to pay the crowdfunding fines. Alan, would you let your rider jump on the podium if they were 4th and 5th? If there's no other way to protest?
Yeah, I don't think that's. If I'm honest with you, I think that it has to be done earlier than that. We've had some meetings with Warner Brothers about a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff I obviously can't talk about on the podcast. But I think that, like you've mentioned earlier about this came out in November. There was comments on the manager's discussion about what do we do about it. There was some pushback then, quite clear. We're not happy with it. We want it to be 5. And the manager's sort of committee pushed that back. And I don't think, if I'm honest, Warner Brothers are that interested in entering a discussion on it. I think that they feel as though it needs to go to 3, and it's going to go to 3. I would love it to be 5, and I think a lot of riders would love it to be 5, but I honestly don't think they want to entertain a discussion on it. And because of that, it's going to be, the riders need to, like you were saying with the Live Tour, they need to come together and actually sit down in a room. I don't think you're going to get the best from anyone if
They've tried that. It's not working.
but I don't think they've got in the room. I think they need to get in the room, and they need to have the right people in the room, and they need to have a good, proper discussion where there's an outcome. Because I think a lot of these things end up with a lot of voices, no outcome, or it's on a group chat. And I just don't think these things can be done apart from if you're in the same room. And I think it could be a bit messy. And I don't. I don't want to see something done where someone's scrambling over the side and a security guard's trying to rugby tackle them, because, in my opinion, they're the 4th place guy or girl. They deserve to be there. It's not sitting that easy with me, and I'm not really sure how we're going to get a decent resolution for it.
Prize money?
Yeah, I can understand Alan's caught in a rock and a hard place with his role.
Yeah.
Sven,
Well,
and
you
I
want
can
it to
see
look.
your
You want
side.
it to. You want it to be professional. You don't want to.
Yeah, and we saw it. We saw it with Crankworks, and everyone said, "Why did they fly all the way out there?" And it's like, well, we didn't see the discussions and the attempts, and like we're opposing this, and can we have a discussion, and can we have a voice? Can we work together for the greater good of the sport? Like it doesn't seem to hurt the organizers as much as we feel to have 5. Like it seems like such a huge win for the one side, and maybe not a huge loss for them, but I'm not in the rooms to understand what they're trying to achieve. And I think you could have had both. Maybe you can visually have 5 for the teams, the riders, the pink bikes, the vitals, the misspent summers. And then maybe for TV, we say, okay, but for TV, we're doing 3. So, we go with that. But as Alan said, like you have to get everyone in the same room, but everyone is focused on their own agenda, which is pretty natural. So why did it happen so late? Well, I don't know. They did try and just no one listened. So then eventually it gets to desperate measures. And I messaged someone connected to someone on this podcast, said, right, so now that you guys have grown a pair and you've decided to push back on one of the things you're not happy with, because I've heard of the 7 million things you're not happy with, are you going to boycott the podium? Question mark. Not saying you should. This rider texted back and said, hell, not if I win the thing. And I thought, yeah, you're kind of right.
I mean,
you can't rob a guy of a win.
And 3rd place.
But you can if you Loic Bruni. You can if you Umri, and you take one for the team. That's what also needs to happen. It's like with the slopestylers, the people that lost the most by doing that protest were the guys at the top of the sport, and they took on for the team. They lost a lot of prize money, lost bonus money, and they were fighting for the smaller guy, the greater good of the sport. So maybe you need a Loic and an Umri and look, we're not going up there now because we've tried the nice way. We're all trying to work in the same direction. And I feel for Warner Brothers because they might, well, the people that work for Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers said, make it 3. So you got to make it 3. Like maybe you don't actually want it 3, but the powers that be said you should. I wish we could all get in the room and like, guys, isn't this an easy win to try overturn this one?
Yeah. What upsets me as much or more than anything else, I think when after the couple of days after the first Brazil World Cup, the Warner Brothers Discovery did issue a statement, and in the statement it said this was proposed back in November, and the stakeholders and the rider representatives were aware of this. So they made it seem in their statement.
Well, they said aware, and they said they were okay with it.
No, it said, yes, it said they were okay, and that is completely false. They were not okay with it. Both stakeholders, because you've got to say teams and riders are stakeholders too, not just other sponsors. So that statement, which that's the one thing that irritates me most, that statement was inherently untrue. And it's maybe written in such a way that you could, have a bit of a cover your ass to that statement. But the rider representatives were not, and I could go into more detail of that, but I'm not going to, but they were not okay with it and signed off on it, and nor were the teams. So that statement's, their excuse is inherently false. I do think perhaps the boycott or should have been done earlier, not the weekend of the race in Brazil. And hats off to those slope starters, because they got exactly what they wanted out of Crankworks, and so well done. It worked out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the spokesperson Rebecca did confirm what you're saying, Sven. They're saying what happened was a bit false, and we're just stating facts here. Like, it wasn't a correct statement. It's not fair to say that the riders were okay with it or aware with it. It's like they all unanimously basically said we don't want to go to 3. So it is a pity. We're just commenting on what I thought I had to bring up. There was going to be some drama in this podcast. That's one of it. It's all over the internet.
Let's end it on a high and not a negative.
I like that.
Super stoked to go to Poland. We're going to drink some vodka and see some crazy fans and good track. And will Lucky fix his mistakes, or is Omri going to be unstoppable? Or is Jackson still going to lose time on the first split after 2 years? We don't know.
Yeah,
and the woman on the title hunt. Yeah, so you've given a little bit there. So is Valley odds-on favorite? Tani with a new bike. Miriam's healthy. Marine on a new team, new bike. I mean, you can't really call that title either, can you? On the women's side.
No,
it's more interesting than ever.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to go to Poland for all of these reasons: the gearbox bikes, the new colours, the new teams, and a pretty open championship. You know, I think that we're all naming a number of different people that can win it, and I can't wait to be there.
There's probably going to be another shit-hot junior that's going to be first-year junior, not Aletha, because we've known about her, but there's another Kiwi girl, Indy, but there's probably going to be some young male junior first year that's just going to come on the scene like Asa and the Allerin brothers did, and we're not even going to have seen it coming. So let's see.
Yeah,
that is exciting. You know what I'm excited for? And I want you guys have got a lot on your plate, but Race Companion is coming out with a bang on the Fantasy League. So I got some news that I'll share later about that. But when this podcast comes out, they're releasing their new website and on socials. So I reckon we got to put our money where our mouth is and do some fantasy picks, because we keep saying it could be this, it could be that rider. I feel like I've got to get Alan and Sven to do that. So I got some exciting news with them. We're going to work together to try and promote that series, because we talk so much about the racing, but I got to start putting my money where my mouth is and get a team in there. So make sure you go check that.
Is there betting, like physical money?
No, me and you are doing that privately. I want to get involved in the betting.
Then we're not putting our money where our mouth is. We've got to.
Well, there's a series. I'll put some prizes together for Moving the Needle League, so you can win there.
Okay, there we go.
But Sven, we can have a bet of a season-long series, and Alan.
After day one practice, I'll place my bets.
You can't. That's too late. You got to do it before.
No. Before the first. No, it's before the first timed race run.
No, well, I'm talking about when you got to submit your team. So let me just check the T's and C's for the official. If it's a side bet, Sven, we can make up our own rules. But I want to get added to the media group, I think, for these bets.
Yeah.
Right.
Alan,
boys,
you guys are legends.
I've
got to go.
Childcare that I can't shirk on. I shirk on
Me too.
far too much childcare. So
Me too, and you,
I know your pain. So if we've missed,
we should call this podcast Three Dads Racing or something.
About bikes.
Three Dads
Rad.
Racing.
We'll start our own media group. Three Dads Racing needs to sign off. Alan,
Sadly, you still have hair, Andrew. You need to lose the hair, and then you can join the real dads team.
Well, I've got a lot of grays you can see in this beard. So that's a hard out, and I understand it just as much as them. But thanks so much for giving us their time. So if we missed anyone, it's because we're all dads and we're responsible parents, and we've got to go do some daddy daycare. But we've got to give a shout out to Crank Brothers as we say goodbye. They are synonymous with downhill racing. They've backed this podcast from basically year 1 or 2. I think we did a few without them. So thanks to them, they're synonymous with the downhill racing circuit. And I said the exciting news is they're going to be on the wheels with Common Selmakov, and they got a host of riders in the shoes. Ronan Dunn, Andy Cole, Bernard Kerr, Ocean O'Callaghan, Lucas Shaw, Cammy Belange, Troy Brosnan, Benoit Coulange, and a host more. I mean, I just basically named a bunch of riders that could win the race. Plus, they got a lot of riders on their pedals. So, till the next one, follow Alan Milway and the Norco Racing Division and Sven Martin Photo on Instagram. Peace. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend. And if we butted in on each other's sentences, that's part of the fun, guys. Don't be so hateful on YouTube. Come on.
YouTube comments are the best.
I'm leaving
Nice
that
one,
in. I'm
boys.
not cutting that. Nice
Yeah,
one.
no, leave that in.